Picture this. It's 2 a.m. and you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation from 3 days ago for the 100th time. Your mind is spinning through every possible scenario about tomorrow's presentation, analyzing every word choice, every potential outcome, everything that could go wrong. Sound familiar? Here's the brutal truth. While you've been overthinking, someone else with half your intelligence and twice your confidence just made the decision you've been agonizing over for weeks. They took action. They moved forward. They got results. Meanwhile, you're still stuck in your head, trapped in an endless loop of analysis that's slowly suffocating your potential. I'm about to show you something that will change everything. Overthinking isn't a sign of intelligence. It's not careful planning. It's not being thorough. Overthinking is a mental prison that's stealing your time, your energy, and your opportunities. And the solution? It's simpler than you think. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to discover why your brain tricks you into overthinking, the hidden costs that are destroying your life, and most importantly, the simple system that will free you from this mental trap forever. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to make faster decisions, take confident action, and finally break free from the paralysis of analysis. But here's the catch. You have to actually apply what you learn. No more overthinking whether this advice will work. No more waiting for the perfect moment to start. The time is now. Chapter 1. The Overthinking Epidemic. We're living in the golden age of overthinking. Never before in human history have we had access to so much information, so many options, so many voices telling us what we should do, how we should think, what we should choose, and it's paralyzing us. Your great-grandfather didn't overthink whether to ask someone on a date. He just did it. Your grandmother didn't spend 3 hours researching the perfect restaurant for dinner. She cooked what was available. They didn't have the luxury of infinite choice, and ironically, that made them more decisive, more action-oriented, more successful in many ways. But here's what's really happening in your brain when you overthink. You're activating what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is the part of your brain that becomes active when you're not focused on the outside world and your mind is wandering. It's the voice in your head that never stops talking, analyzing, worrying, planning. The problem is that this network was designed for a different world. Thousands of years ago, when our ancestors faced a rustling bush, overthinking could save their lives. Is it a predator? Is it the wind? Should I run or investigate? That careful analysis was the difference between survival and death. But in today's world, that same mechanism is working against you. Your brain treats choosing a career path with the same urgency as escaping a saber-toothed tiger. It floods you with cortisol, activates your fight-or-flight response, and keeps you in a state of chronic stress and indecision. Here's the shocking reality. The average person makes about 35, 0 decisions per day. From what to wear to what to eat, from which route to take to work, to what to watch on Netflix. And if you're overthinking even a fraction of these decisions, you're burning through your mental energy faster than a sports car burns through gasoline. This is called decision fatigue, and it's why successful people like Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day, why Barack Obama only wore blue or gray suits as president, why Mark Zuckerberg has a closet full of identical gray t-shirts. They understood something that most people don't. Your willpower and decision-making ability are finite resources. Every time you overthink a small decision, you're depleting the mental energy you need for the big ones. You're essentially choosing to be tired, stressed, and indecisive about the things that actually matter because you wasted your cognitive resources worrying about things that don't. But it gets worse. Overthinking doesn't just drain your energy, it actually makes you worse at making decisions. When you overanalyze, you start to doubt information that was perfectly clear before. You begin to see problems that don't exist, create obstacles that aren't there, and convince yourself that simple solutions are somehow inadequate. This is why your first instinct is often your best instinct. Your subconscious mind processes information incredibly quickly, drawing on years of experience and pattern recognition to give you an immediate gut feeling. But then your conscious mind steps in with its need to analyze everything. And suddenly what was clear becomes cloudy. The most successful people in the world aren't the smartest. They're the most decisive. They understand that a good decision made quickly is almost always better than a perfect decision made too late. They know that you can course correct along the way, but you can't make progress while you're standing still. Think about the last major opportunity you missed because you overthought it. Maybe it was a job offer you analyzed to death until the position was filled by someone else. Maybe it was an investment opportunity you researched so thoroughly that by the time you were ready to act, the moment had passed. Maybe it was asking someone out, starting a business, moving to a new city, or taking any kind of meaningful risk. Now think about how you felt afterward. Regret, right? Not because you made the wrong decision, but because you didn't make any decision at all. You let overthinking steal your opportunity, your confidence, your momentum. This epidemic of overthinking is creating a generation of smart, capable people who are paralyzed by their own intelligence. They know too much, consider too many variables, see too many potential outcomes. They're like chess grandmasters trying to calculate every possible move in a game where the rules keep changing. Chapter 2. The Neuroscience of Mental Paralysis. Let's dive deep into what's actually happening in your brain when you get stuck in overthinking mode. Understanding the neuroscience will help you recognize when it's happening and give you the power to interrupt the pattern. When you start overthinking, your brain activates several key regions simultaneously. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and planning, goes into overdrive. It's like having a computer with too many programs running at once. Everything slows down, gets glitchy, and eventually freezes. At the same time, your anterior cingulate cortex, which processes emotions and monitors for conflicts, starts firing rapidly. This is the part of your brain that notices when things don't feel right, when there's uncertainty, when you're facing a potential threat to your ego or well-being. It's essentially your internal alarm system, and when you overthink, it gets stuck in the on position. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, begins releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals were designed to help you respond quickly to immediate physical threats. But when they're triggered by mental scenarios that may never happen, they create a state of chronic anxiety and hypervigilance. Here's where it gets really interesting. When your brain is in this overthinking state, it actually starts to form new neural pathways that reinforce the pattern. Every time you choose to analyze instead of act, you're literally rewiring your brain to be more indecisive in the future. It's like creating a mental rut that gets deeper every time you drive through it. This is why overthinking becomes addictive. Your brain starts to believe that more analysis equals better outcomes, even though research consistently shows the opposite. Studies have found that people who trust their gut instincts make better decisions than those who extensively deliberate, especially in complex situations with multiple variables. One of the most fascinating studies on this topic was conducted by researchers at the University of Amsterdam. They had participants choose between different cars based on multiple attributes. One group was asked to make an immediate decision, another was given time to consciously deliberate, and a third group was distracted with other tasks while their unconscious mind processed the information. The results were stunning. The group that was distracted and couldn't consciously overthink the decision actually made the best choices. Their unconscious minds were able to weigh all the factors without getting bogged down in analysis paralysis. This happens because your unconscious mind can process vastly more information than your conscious mind. While your conscious mind can handle about 7 pieces of information at once, your unconscious mind can process millions of pieces of data simultaneously. It's like comparing a calculator to a supercomputer. But here's the kicker. When you overthink, you're essentially forcing your calculator to do the supercomputer's job. You're taking a system that's designed for rapid, intuitive processing and trying to make it work like a slow, methodical analyzer. It's no wonder you feel mentally exhausted and confused. The overthinking brain also exhibits something called temporal discounting dysfunction. This is a fancy way of saying that when you're stuck in analysis mode, you become terrible at weighing immediate costs against future benefits. You start to overvalue minor risks and undervalue major opportunities. For example, you might spend weeks researching the perfect time to start investing, worried about market volatility and potential losses, while completely ignoring the massive opportunity cost of not investing at all. Your overthinking brain becomes so focused on avoiding small, immediate risks that it blinds you to large, long-term consequences. Neuroimaging studies show that overthinkers have increased activity in what's called the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that become active when you're not focused on the outside world. This network includes the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus. And when it's overactive, it creates that constant mental chatter that never seems to stop. People with anxiety and depression often show hyperactivity in this network, which explains why overthinking is so closely linked to these conditions. The brain gets trapped in loops of self-referential thinking, constantly monitoring, analyzing, and worrying about internal states, instead of engaging with the external world. But here's the good news. Neuroplasticity means your brain can change. Just as you've trained your brain to overthink through repetition, you can train it to be more decisive through different kinds of repetition. Every time you catch yourself overthinking and choose to take action instead, you're building new neural pathways that support quick, confident decision-making. The key is understanding that your brain's tendency to overthink isn't a character flaw or a sign of intelligence. It's simply a pattern that can be changed. Like any habit, it feels automatic and natural because you've practiced it so many times, but that doesn't mean it's serving you. Chapter 3. The Hidden Costs of Analysis Paralysis. While you've been sitting there analyzing every possible outcome, life has been passing you by. The hidden costs of overthinking are far more devastating than most people realize, and they compound over time like interest on a debt you never knew you owed. Let's start with the most obvious cost: time. The average overthinker spends 2-3 hours per day stuck in mental loops, analyzing decisions that could be made in minutes. That's 21 hours per week, or roughly 731,095 hours per year. To put that in perspective, you could learn a new language, master a musical instrument, or build a substantial side business with that time. But time isn't the only thing you're losing. Every moment spent overthinking is a moment not spent taking action. And action is what creates results. While you're perfecting your business plan, someone else is launching their imperfect version and learning from real customer feedback. While you're researching the perfect workout routine, someone else is at the gym building muscle and strength. This leads to what psychologists call analysis paralysis, the state where you've analyzed a situation so thoroughly that you become incapable of making any decision at all. You've considered every angle, every risk, every possible outcome. And instead of feeling more confident, you feel overwhelmed and frozen. The irony is brutal. The more you think about a decision, the less confident you become in your ability to make it. This happens because overthinking activates your brain's error detection system, which starts to find problems and inconsistencies that weren't apparent before. What seemed like a clear choice becomes murky and complicated. This leads to what researchers call decision avoidance, the tendency to postpone or delegate decisions when they become too complex or overwhelming. You might tell yourself you're being careful and thorough, but what you're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of commitment and the possibility of being wrong. The financial costs of overthinking are staggering. In the investment world, analysis paralysis costs people millions of dollars every year, while overthinkers are researching the perfect stock, bond, or real estate investment. Markets move, opportunities disappear, and compound interest works against them instead of for them. Career-wise, overthinking is equally destructive. How many promotions have you not pursued because you weren't ready yet? How many networking events have you skipped because you didn't know exactly what to say? How many business ideas have died in your head because you couldn't stop finding potential problems? The opportunity cost of overthinking is enormous because opportunities have expiration dates. The job opening won't wait for you to perfectly craft your application. The potential business partner won't wait for you to finish your analysis. The chance to invest in that property won't wait for you to research every possible risk. But perhaps the most devastating cost is psychological. Chronic overthinking erodes your confidence in your own judgment. Every time you second-guess yourself, every time you analyze a decision to death, every time you choose analysis over action, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't trust your own instincts. This creates a vicious cycle. The less you trust yourself, the more you feel the need to overthink. The more you overthink, the less confident you become. Over time, you develop what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that your actions don't matter, that outcomes are beyond your control, that you're powerless to create the life you want. Relationships suffer tremendously from overthinking. When you overanalyze every text message, every facial expression, every social interaction, you create problems that don't exist and miss connections that do. You become so focused on managing impressions and avoiding rejection that you forget to be authentic and present. The energy cost of overthinking is also significant. Your brain uses about 20% of your body's total energy, and when it's stuck in overdrive, that percentage increases dramatically. This is why a day of overthinking can leave you feeling more exhausted than a day of physical labor. You're literally burning yourself out without producing anything of value. Creativity and innovation are casualties of overthinking as well. When your mind is constantly analyzing and critiquing, there's no space for new ideas to emerge. You become so focused on what's practical, safe, and logical that you lose touch with what's possible, exciting, and revolutionary. The health impacts are real too. Chronic overthinking triggers the same stress response as real physical threats, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this leads to elevated blood pressure, weakened immune function, disrupted sleep, and increased risk of anxiety and depression. Social costs accumulate as well. Overthinkers often become boring conversationalists because they're so focused on saying the right thing that they say nothing interesting at all. They miss out on spontaneous adventures, last-minute opportunities, and the kind of experiences that create lasting memories and deep connections. Perhaps most tragically, overthinking robs you of the present moment. While your mind is spinning through past regrets and future worries, life is happening right now. You miss sunsets because you're worried about tomorrow's weather. You miss conversations because you're analyzing what you should say next. You miss opportunities for joy because you're focused on potential problems. The compound effect of these costs is staggering. Small decisions that could be made in seconds stretch into hours. Simple opportunities become complex problems. Clear paths become maze-like puzzles. And slowly, over months and years, overthinking transforms capable, intelligent people into hesitant, anxious, paralyzed versions of themselves. Chapter 4. Why your brain tricks you into overthinking. Your brain isn't trying to sabotage you when it falls into overthinking patterns. In fact, it's trying to protect you using mechanisms that were perfectly adapted for a world that no longer exists. Understanding why your brain defaults to overthinking will help you recognize when it's happening and give you the compassion to change the pattern without fighting against your own nature. The primary culprit is what evolutionary psychologists call the better safe than sorry principle. For millions of years, our ancestors survived by being cautious, by thinking through potential threats, by considering what could go wrong before taking action. The humans who rushed into unknown situations without analysis often didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. This cautious mindset served us well when the stakes were literally life and death. If you heard a noise in the bushes, it was better to spend time analyzing whether it was a predator than to ignore it and potentially become someone's dinner. If you were considering eating an unknown plant, extensive deliberation could save you from poisoning. But here's the problem. Your ancient brain doesn't distinguish between choosing a restaurant for dinner and escaping from a saber-toothed tiger. Both situations trigger the same analytical processes, the same caution mechanisms, the same tendency to consider every possible negative outcome. Modern life has created what researchers call a threat detection malfunction. Your brain's early warning system, which was calibrated for physical dangers that appeared suddenly and required immediate response, is now constantly activated by abstract, future-oriented concerns that may never actually materialize. When you're lying in bed worrying about a presentation next week, your brain is responding as if the audience is already there, judging you, waiting to pounce on your mistakes. When you're analyzing whether to ask someone on a date, your brain is treating potential rejection like a physical attack on your survival. This is compounded by what psychologists call the negativity bias, your brain's tendency to focus more on potential losses than potential gains. Studies show that people feel the pain of losing 100 more intensely than the pleasure of gaining 100. This bias made sense when resources were scarce and losing anything could mean starvation. But in today's abundant world, it often prevents us from taking beneficial risks. Your brain also has a built-in completion tendency. It wants to resolve open loops and answer unanswered questions. This is why you can't stop thinking about a problem until you've solved it, even when the problem doesn't actually need solving. Your brain perceives unresolved decisions as threats to your sense of control and competence. Social media and information overload have hijacked these natural tendencies. Your brain receives thousands of data points every day about what you should do, what you should want, what you should achieve. This creates what psychologists call choice overload, when having too many options actually makes decision-making harder, not easier. The famous jam study illustrated this perfectly. When shoppers were offered 24 varieties of jam to sample, only 3% made a purchase. But when they were offered just 6 varieties, 30% bought jam. More options led to more analysis, more comparison, more second-guessing, and ultimately more paralysis. Your brain also falls victim to what's called the planning fallacy, the tendency to underestimate how long tasks will take and overestimate your ability to complete them perfectly. This leads to endless planning and replanning, as your brain keeps trying to create the perfect strategy that will guarantee success. Social comparison adds another layer of complexity. Thanks to social media, you're constantly exposed to curated highlights of other people's lives, creating pressure to make optimal choices that will lead to Instagram-worthy outcomes. Your brain starts to treat every decision as a performance that will be judged by others. The paradox of choice has reached epidemic proportions. Your ancestors might have had to choose between 3 potential mates in their village. You have access to millions through dating apps. They might have had one career path available. You have thousands of possibilities. They ate what was available. You have infinite restaurant options, dietary philosophies, and nutrition advice to consider. Your brain's pattern-matching system, which once helped you recognize dangerous situations based on limited information, now gets overwhelmed by the complexity of modern decisions. It keeps searching for patterns and precedents that don't exist, trying to apply simple heuristics to complex, unprecedented situations. Fear of regret plays a massive role in overthinking. Your brain has learned that making the wrong choice leads to emotional discomfort, so it tries to prevent regret by analyzing every possible outcome. But this creates a paradox. The fear of making the wrong choice often prevents you from making any choice at all, which guarantees the regret you are trying to avoid. The availability heuristic causes your brain to overweight recent or memorable information when making decisions. If you recently heard about someone's business failing, your brain will overestimate the likelihood of your own business failing. If you saw a news story about a plane crash, your brain will overestimate the dangers of flying, even though statistically you're much more likely to be injured driving to the airport. Perfectionism compounds all of these tendencies. Your brain starts to believe that there's one right answer to every question, one optimal choice in every situation. This creates impossible standards and endless analysis as you search for a perfect solution that probably doesn't exist. The confirmation bias kicks in during extended analysis periods. Your brain starts to seek information that confirms your existing fears or doubts while ignoring evidence that supports taking action. If you're scared of starting a business, you'll find every article about business failures while somehow missing all the success stories. Understanding these mechanisms isn't about judging your brain or trying to override its natural tendencies. It's about recognizing when these protective systems are working against you in modern contexts and developing strategies to work with your brain's nature while still taking decisive action. Chapter 5. The Illusion of Productive Thinking. Here's the most dangerous lie your brain tells you about overthinking: that it's productive. That all that mental spinning, analyzing, and planning is actually accomplishing something valuable. That you're being responsible, thorough, and intelligent by considering every angle before taking action. This illusion is so convincing that many overthinkers wear their analysis paralysis like a badge of honor. They tell themselves they're being careful, strategic, or thoughtful. They look at people who make quick decisions and judge them as impulsive, reckless, or shallow. But the research tells a completely different story. Studies consistently show that excessive deliberation leads to worse outcomes, not better ones. When researchers track decision quality over time, they find that people who trust their initial instincts and act quickly generally achieve better results than those who analyze extensively before acting. Why does this happen? Because thinking and doing activate completely different parts of your brain. When you're thinking about riding a bicycle, you use your prefrontal cortex to analyze balance, speed, and steering. But when you're actually riding a bicycle, you use your cerebellum and motor cortex to execute smooth, automatic movements. The thinking brain and the doing brain operate on entirely different systems. The same principle applies to every area of life. You can think about having a conversation with someone for hours, planning what you'll say, anticipating their responses, rehearsing your reactions. But the actual conversation will unfold based on real-time social cues, emotional dynamics, and spontaneous moments that no amount of pre-planning can predict. This is why the most charismatic people aren't the ones who plan out every word. They're the ones who stay present and respond authentically to whatever emerges. They trust their social intelligence to guide them in the moment rather than trying to script the interaction in advance. The illusion of productive thinking is reinforced by the fact that analysis feels like work. Your brain is active. You're using energy. You feel mentally engaged. But feeling busy isn't the same as being productive. You can spend 8 hours thinking about a problem and make zero progress towards solving it. Meanwhile, someone else can spend 8 minutes taking action and move significantly closer to their goal. This is particularly evident in creative fields. Writers who spend months outlining and planning their novels often struggle to complete them, while writers who start with a simple idea and let the story unfold as they write tend to be more prolific and often produce more engaging work. The thinking creates resistance. The doing creates momentum. The business world is full of examples of this principle. Companies that spend years perfecting their business plans often find that the market has changed by the time they're ready to launch. Meanwhile, companies that launch quickly with minimum viable products can adapt and improve based on real customer feedback rather than theoretical projections. Your brain creates the illusion of productivity through what psychologists call cognitive ease. When you're thinking about a problem repeatedly, it becomes more familiar, and familiarity feels like understanding. You start to believe you know more about the situation than you actually do, simply because you've thought about it so much. This false confidence can be dangerous because it makes you feel prepared for situations you've never actually experienced. You might think you know how you'll perform in a job interview because you've rehearsed it mentally dozens of times. But mental rehearsal is fundamentally different from real-world performance under pressure. The planning fallacy demonstrates this perfectly. Despite having extensive plans and analyses, most projects still go over budget, past deadlines, and encounter unexpected obstacles. This isn't because people are bad planners. It's because thinking about doing something is categorically different from actually doing it. Overthinking also creates what researchers call analysis paralysis by perfectionism. Your brain starts to believe that if it just thinks a little longer, considers a few more variables, researches one more option, it will find the perfect solution. But perfection is a moving target that retreats as fast as you approach it. The truth is that most decisions are reversible or adjustable. You can change jobs, end relationships, move to different cities, pivot business strategies, or modify almost any choice you make. But overthinking treats every decision as permanent and catastrophic, which creates artificial pressure that leads to even more analysis. Real productivity comes from iteration, not ideation. It comes from trying something, learning from the results, adjusting your approach, and trying again. This cycle of action and feedback is how you actually improve, grow, and achieve your goals. Thinking alone, no matter how extensive or sophisticated, cannot substitute for this experiential learning process. The most successful entrepreneurs, athletes, and creatives understand this principle intuitively. They know that you can't think your way to mastery. You have to practice your way there. They embrace what tech companies call failing fast, trying things quickly, learning from what doesn't work, and iterating toward what does. This doesn't mean abandoning all planning or preparation. It means recognizing the difference between productive thinking that leads to action and unproductive thinking that substitutes for action. Productive thinking is focused, time-limited, and goal-oriented. It asks specific questions like, what's the first step? Or, what information do I actually need to make this decision? Unproductive thinking is circular, endless, and anxiety-driven. It asks impossible questions like, what if everything goes wrong? Or, how can I guarantee this will work? These questions feel important, but they're actually procrastination dressed up as preparation. The illusion of productive thinking is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-sabotage because it allows you to feel like you're making progress while actually standing still. Breaking free from this illusion requires honestly assessing whether your thinking is moving you toward action or away from it, whether it's solving problems or creating them, whether it's building confidence or eroding it. Chapter 6. The 2-Minute Decision Rule. Here's where everything changes. I'm about to give you the most powerful tool for breaking free from overthinking, and it's so simple that your brain will initially resist it because it seems too easy. But simplicity is exactly what makes it work. The 2-Minute Decision Rule states this: if a decision can be made with the information you currently have and won't have irreversible, catastrophic consequences, give yourself exactly 2 minutes to decide. Not 2 hours, not 2 days, not 2 weeks, 2 minutes. Here's how it works in practice. Set a timer for 2 minutes. During those 2 minutes, you can consider the options, weigh the pros and cons, think through the immediate consequences. But when that timer goes off, you must make a decision. No extensions, no exceptions, just 5 more minutes to think about it. The magic of this rule isn't in the time limit itself. It's in what the time limit forces your brain to do. When you know you only have 2 minutes, your mind automatically filters out irrelevant information and focuses on what actually matters. It stops trying to predict every possible future scenario and starts evaluating based on current reality. Your brain has 2 decision-making systems. System 1 is fast, intuitive, and based on pattern recognition and accumulated experience. System 2 is slow, analytical, and based on conscious reasoning. Overthinking happens when System 2 takes over decisions that System 1 is perfectly equipped to handle. The 2-minute rule forces you to rely more on System 1, which is actually superior for most life decisions. System 1 processes massive amounts of information instantly, drawing on everything you've learned, experienced, and observed throughout your life. It's like having access to a supercomputer that can analyze millions of variables in seconds. System 2, the analytical mind, can only handle about 7 pieces of information at once. When you give it a complex decision with multiple variables, it gets overwhelmed and starts creating artificial complications to justify its involvement. It's like asking a calculator to run a complex simulation. It's not designed for that kind of work. The beauty of the 2-minute rule is that it works for an enormous range of decisions. Should you take that job offer? 2 minutes is enough to consider the salary, the role, the company, the location, and how it aligns with your goals. Should you ask someone on a date? 2 minutes is more than enough to evaluate your interest, their apparent interest, and the potential for connection. Should you start that side business? 2 minutes can determine if you have the skills, the market demand, the initial resources, and the motivation to begin. Should you end a relationship that's not working? 2 minutes is sufficient to assess your happiness, your partner's happiness, your shared goals, and whether the issues are solvable. But here's what separates successful people from chronic overthinkers. They understand that most decisions are not permanent. If you take a job and it's not the right fit, you can find another job. If you ask someone out and they say no, you can ask someone else. If you start a business and it doesn't work, you can start a different business or go back to employment. The fear of making the wrong decision is almost always disproportionate to the actual consequences of that decision. Your brain treats choosing a restaurant like a life or death scenario. But in reality, the worst-case scenario is a mediocre meal and the loss of an hour and some money. These consequences are so minor that spending more than 2 minutes deciding is objectively irrational. Even bigger decisions rarely have the catastrophic consequences your overthinking brain imagines. Moving to a new city? If you don't like it, you can move again. Changing careers? Most people change careers multiple times throughout their lives. Getting married? Divorce exists. And while it's not ideal, it's not the end of the world either. The 2-minute rule also eliminates decision avoidance. When you know you have to decide in 2 minutes, you can't postpone the decision indefinitely. You can't wait for more information, more time, or more certainty. You have to work with what you have right now, which is almost always sufficient for making a good decision. This rule forces you to distinguish between decisions that matter and decisions that don't. If you can't decide something in 2 minutes, ask yourself, is this decision actually important enough to warrant extended analysis? Or am I overthinking something that will have minimal impact on my life? Most of the decisions we agonize over fall into the second category. What to wear to work, what to have for lunch, which movie to watch, what to post on social media. These micro-decisions consume enormous amounts of mental energy despite having virtually no impact on our long-term well-being or success. The 2-minute rule also builds decision-making confidence. Every time you make a quick decision and survive the consequences, which you almost always will, you prove to yourself that extensive analysis isn't necessary. You start to trust your judgment, your instincts, your ability to handle whatever results from your choices. Start implementing this rule immediately with low-stakes decisions. When you're choosing what to eat for lunch, set a 2-minute timer and decide. When you're picking something to watch on Netflix, give yourself 2 minutes max. When you're deciding whether to go to a social event, 2 minutes is plenty. As you build confidence with small decisions, gradually apply the rule to bigger ones. The key is to start where the stakes are low, so you can prove to yourself that quick decisions don't lead to disaster. In fact, you'll likely find that your quick decisions are just as good as, and often better than, your extensively analyzed ones. Remember, the goal isn't to make perfect decisions. The goal is to make good enough decisions quickly, so you can spend your time and energy implementing those decisions rather than endlessly reconsidering them. Action beats analysis every single time. The 2-minute rule will feel uncomfortable at first because it goes against everything your overthinking brain believes about decision-making. Your brain will insist that important decisions require more time, more analysis, more consideration. But your brain is wrong. Most decisions require more action, not more thought. Chapter 7. The 80% Rule and Good Enough Decision-Making. Perfectionism is the fuel that powers the overthinking engine. Your brain becomes convinced that there's one optimal choice in every situation. One perfect path forward. One ideal outcome that can be achieved if you just analyze long enough and hard enough. This pursuit of perfection is what keeps you stuck, paralyzed, and perpetually dissatisfied with your decisions. The 80% rule offers a radical alternative. Make decisions when you have 80% of the information you think you need, and you're 80% confident in your choice. Don't wait for 100% certainty, because it doesn't exist. Don't hold out for perfect information, because you'll never have it. Don't demand guarantees, because life doesn't offer them. This rule is based on a fundamental truth that overthinkers struggle to accept. In most situations, a good decision made quickly beats a perfect decision made too late. The remaining 20% of information you're waiting for rarely changes the fundamental nature of the decision, but it can cost you the opportunity to act when action matters most. Military leaders understand this principle intimately. In combat situations, waiting for perfect intelligence can mean the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death. They operate on what they call the 70% solution. If you have 70% of the information and 70% confidence, you act. The speed of decision matters more than the perfection of decision. Business leaders operate similarly. Amazon's Jeff Bezos was famous for making decisions with what he called disagree and commit. If he was 70% confident in a direction, he would fully commit to it, rather than spending months trying to get to 90% confidence. This decision-making speed was a key factor in Amazon's ability to innovate and dominate multiple markets. The 80% rule works because of diminishing returns on analysis. The first 20% of your research typically provides 80% of the useful information. The next 60% of research provides only 20% additional value. The final 20% of research, the part that gets you from pretty sure to absolutely certain, provides almost no additional value while consuming enormous amounts of time and energy. Think about buying a car. The first hour of research tells you about reliability ratings, price ranges, fuel efficiency, and safety scores. The second hour might teach you about specific features, warranty details, and dealer incentives. But the 20th hour of research, you're probably comparing thread counts on floor mats or analyzing the exact shade differences between paint options. That's not productive research. That's procrastination disguised as preparation. The 80% rule also acknowledges a crucial reality. You can course correct as you go. Most decisions aren't permanent, and most mistakes are recoverable. If you choose a direction and new information emerges that suggests a different path would be better, you can adjust. But you can't make progress while you're standing still, waiting for perfect clarity. This principle applies powerfully to career decisions. You don't need to find the perfect job. You need to find a good job that moves you in the right direction. You can learn what you like and don't like through actual experience. Then use that information to make your next career move. But if you wait for the perfect opportunity, you might wait forever while missing dozens of good opportunities that could have advanced your career. The same logic applies to relationships. You don't need to find the perfect person. You need to find someone who meets your core criteria and with whom you feel a genuine connection. You can learn about compatibility through spending time together, not through endless analysis of their social media profiles or interrogation of mutual friends. Entrepreneurship is perhaps the perfect example of why the 80% rule matters. No business plan survives contact with real customers. No matter how thoroughly you research your market, your competitors, your pricing strategy, you won't know what actually works until you launch and start getting real-world feedback. The entrepreneurs who succeed are those who launch with good enough plans and iterate based on actual results. The 80% rule helps you avoid what researchers call information overload paralysis. When you have too much information, your brain struggles to process it all effectively. You start to weight minor factors equally with major ones. You begin to see patterns and problems that don't actually exist. You convince yourself that you need just a little more information to make the right choice. But here's the paradox. The more information you gather, the less confident you often become in your decision. This happens because additional information frequently introduces complexity rather than clarity. You start to see downsides you hadn't considered, alternatives you hadn't explored, variables you hadn't accounted for. This is why your first instinct is often your best instinct. Your initial reaction to a situation is based on rapid processing of the most relevant information, filtered through your experience and intuition. As you gather more information, you start second-guessing this initial assessment, even though it was likely more accurate than your overthought conclusion. The 80% rule also protects you from analysis paralysis by imposing a decision deadline. Once you reach 80% confidence, you stop researching and start acting. This prevents the endless deferral that characterizes chronic overthinking. Implementing the 80% rule requires developing comfort with uncertainty. You have to accept that you'll never have complete information, that some risk is inherent in every decision, that you can't control every outcome. This acceptance is liberating because it frees you from the impossible burden of trying to predict and prevent every possible negative consequence. Start practicing with decisions where the stakes are moderate. When you're choosing a vacation destination, stop researching when you're 80% sure about a place. When you're deciding whether to attend a social event, make the call when you're 80% confident about your preference. When you're considering a purchase, buy it when you're 80% satisfied with your research. The key is to recognize the difference between useful information and information gathering as procrastination. Useful information directly impacts your decision. Procrastination information is just more data that makes you feel busy without actually moving you closer to a choice. Remember, the goal isn't to be right 100% of the time. That's impossible. The goal is to be right often enough that your quick decisions create better outcomes than your slow ones. And research consistently shows that people who make faster decisions with less information often achieve better results than those who analyze extensively before acting. The 80% rule teaches you to trust yourself, to value speed over perfection, and to embrace the iterative nature of life. You make the best decision you can with the information you have, then adjust course as new information emerges. This approach leads to faster progress, less stress, and surprisingly better outcomes than the perfectionist alternative. Chapter 8. Creating Decision Deadlines that Actually Work. One of the most insidious aspects of overthinking is how it creates the illusion of productivity while actually preventing progress. You tell yourself you're still deciding or gathering more information, but what you're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of commitment. Decision deadlines cut through this self-deception by forcing action within a specific time frame. But not all decision deadlines work. Most people set arbitrary deadlines that their brains don't take seriously. Or they set unrealistic deadlines that create stress without promoting good decision-making. Effective decision deadlines have specific characteristics that make them psychologically compelling and practically useful. First, effective deadlines are tied to external consequences, not just internal preferences. If you tell yourself you'll decide about a job offer by the end of the week, your brain knows there's no real consequence for missing that deadline. But if the job offer expires at 5 p.m. on Friday, your brain treats that as a hard boundary that must be respected. This is why artificial scarcity works so effectively in marketing. When a sale is ending at midnight, when there are only 3 items left in stock, when an offer is available for the next 24 hours only, your brain shifts into decision mode. It stops analyzing and starts choosing because the window of opportunity is closing. You can create this same urgency for your own decisions by tying them to real external deadlines. If you're trying to decide whether to take a class, register by the early deadline to save money. If you're considering a career change, apply for jobs before the application deadlines close. If you're thinking about moving to a new city, book apartment viewings for a specific weekend trip. Second, effective deadlines are short enough to prevent overthinking, but long enough to allow adequate consideration. For most personal decisions, this sweet spot is between 24 hours and 1 week. Shorter deadlines don't give you enough time to gather essential information. Longer deadlines give your brain too much time to spiral into analysis paralysis. The key is calibrating the deadline to the importance and complexity of the decision. Choosing a restaurant for dinner tonight gets a 15-minute deadline. Deciding whether to accept a job offer gets a 3-day deadline. Choosing whether to buy a house gets a 1-week deadline. The more important the decision, the longer the deadline, but never longer than necessary for adequate consideration. Third, effective deadlines include specific trigger points that move you from analysis to action. These are predetermined criteria that automatically shift you into decision mode. For example, I'll research vacation options for 2 hours, then book whichever destination seems most appealing. Or, I'll consider this relationship for 1 month, then decide whether to commit or end it. These trigger points prevent the endless deferral that characterizes overthinking. Your brain can't keep moving the goalposts because you've already defined what constitutes sufficient analysis. Once you hit the trigger point, you're committed to deciding regardless of whether you feel ready. Fourth, effective deadlines create accountability through external commitment. Tell someone about your deadline and ask them to check in with you. Post about it on social media. Write it down and put it somewhere visible. Make it harder to ignore or rationalize away your deadline by involving other people in holding you accountable. This external accountability is crucial because your overthinking brain is incredibly skilled at creating excuses for why just a little more time would be helpful. It will convince you that unexpected information has emerged, that the situation has become more complex, that you need to consider new variables. External accountability helps you recognize these excuses for what they are. Fifth, effective deadlines include predetermined consequences for missing the deadline. If you don't decide by your deadline, what happens? Maybe you automatically choose the first option you considered. Maybe you ask someone else to decide for you. Maybe you eliminate the option that's causing the most analysis paralysis. These consequences don't need to be punitive. They just need to be automatic and predefined. The goal is to make inaction more uncomfortable than action, to create a situation where deciding feels easier than continuing to deliberate. For major life decisions, consider using what I call graduated deadlines. Break the decision into phases, each with its own deadline. Phase 1 might be gathering basic information within 3 days. Phase 2 might be narrowing down to 2 options within a week. Phase 3 might be making the final choice within 10 days. This approach prevents the overwhelming feeling that comes with trying to make a complex decision all at once, while still maintaining forward momentum. Each phase deadline creates urgency, while the overall structure ensures steady progress toward a final decision. Decision deadlines also work because they force you to clarify your decision criteria up front. When you know you have limited time to decide, you naturally focus on the factors that matter most. You stop getting distracted by minor details and concentrate on major considerations. This clarity is valuable even beyond the immediate decision. By understanding what criteria matter most to you, you develop better self-knowledge and can make future decisions more quickly and confidently. One powerful technique is the default option deadline strategy. When you're struggling to choose between multiple options, designate one as your default choice. If you haven't actively chosen something else by your deadline, you automatically go with the default. This removes the pressure of making an active decision while still ensuring that you don't remain stuck in analysis indefinitely. The default option should be the choice that seems most reasonable with current information, the one you'd pick if you had to decide right now. This approach acknowledges that sometimes the best decision is simply making any decision and moving forward. For decisions that seem impossibly complex, try the elimination deadline approach. Instead of trying to choose the best option, focus on eliminating the worst options by specific deadlines. Day 1. Eliminate any options that don't meet your basic requirements. Day 3. Eliminate options that would create financial stress. Day 5. Eliminate options that don't align with your long-term goals. This process of elimination often leaves you with one clear choice, or at least narrows the field enough that the final decision becomes much easier. Remember, the purpose of decision deadlines isn't to force you into bad choices. It's to prevent the perfect from being the enemy of the good. Deadlines help you recognize when you have sufficient information to make a reasonable decision and prevent you from falling into the trap of endless analysis. Most importantly, decision deadlines help you develop decision-making confidence. Every time you make a deadline and follow through, you prove to yourself that you can make good choices quickly. This builds the trust in your own judgment that's essential for breaking free from overthinking patterns. Chapter 9. The action. First, mindset. Everything changes when you flip the script from think, then act, to act, then think. The action, first mindset, is perhaps the most radical departure from traditional decision-making advice. But it's also the most effective way to break free from analysis paralysis and start creating real results in your life. The traditional approach teaches us to plan extensively before taking any action. Think through every possibility, consider every outcome, research every option, then act only when you're certain of success. This sounds reasonable, but it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how learning and progress actually work. Real learning happens through experience, not analysis. You can read every book about swimming, watch every instructional video, study every technique, but you won't actually know how to swim until you get in the water and start moving. The same principle applies to every meaningful skill and life decision. The action-first mindset recognizes that action generates information that thinking alone cannot provide. When you start before you're ready, when you begin before you feel prepared, when you act despite uncertainty, you gain access to feedback, data, and insights that no amount of pre-planning could have revealed. This is why minimum viable products are so powerful in business. Instead of spending months or years perfecting a product based on theoretical customer needs, companies launch basic versions quickly and improve them based on real customer feedback. This approach consistently produces better results than extensive upfront planning. The same strategy works for personal decisions. Instead of spending months researching the perfect career path, start taking small actions in directions that interest you. Volunteer in that field. Take a relevant class. Interview people who do that work. Shadow someone for a day. These actions will teach you more about whether it's the right fit than any amount of abstract research. The action-first mindset also leverages what psychologists call implementation intention. When you commit to taking specific actions by specific dates, your brain automatically starts scanning for opportunities and resources to support those actions. You become more likely to notice relevant information, meet helpful people, and discover unexpected possibilities. This happens because action creates momentum, and momentum attracts resources. When you're actively working toward something, people can see your commitment and are more likely to offer help, advice, or opportunities. When you're just thinking about something, there's nothing visible for others to support. Consider the difference between saying, "I'm thinking about starting a business," and saying, "I'm launching my business next month." The first statement invites casual conversation but no real support. The second statement signals serious intent and often generates offers of help, connections, and resources. The action-first mindset doesn't mean acting recklessly or without any consideration. It means taking the smallest possible action that will generate useful information or move you in your desired direction. These small actions compound over time into significant progress, while small amounts of thinking compound into nothing but mental fatigue. For example, if you're considering asking someone on a date, the smallest action might be starting a conversation with them. If you're thinking about changing careers, the smallest action might be updating your resume or browsing job listings. If you're contemplating moving to a new city, the smallest action might be researching neighborhoods or planning a visit. These small actions break the spell of overthinking by shifting you from passive consumption of information to active generation of experience. They move you from the realm of possibility into the realm of reality, where you can get actual feedback rather than theoretical projections. The action-first mindset also protects you from what researchers call planning fallacy, the tendency to underestimate how long tasks will take and overestimate your ability to predict outcomes. When you start taking action early, you discover the real timeline and requirements for achieving your goals, which allows you to adjust your approach based on reality rather than assumptions. This is particularly important for creative projects. Writers who start writing before they have complete plot outlines often produce more engaging stories than those who plan extensively before beginning. The act of writing reveals character motivations, plot possibilities, and thematic elements that couldn't be discovered through planning alone. Musicians who start recording demos before perfecting their songs often capture energy and authenticity that gets lost in over-rehearsed performances. Artists who start painting before they have complete compositional plans often create more dynamic and interesting work than those who sketch extensively before beginning. The action-first mindset requires developing comfort with imperfection and uncertainty. You have to be willing to start before you're ready, to begin before you're prepared, to act despite not knowing exactly where you're going. This feels uncomfortable initially, but it's actually much more aligned with how life actually works. Life is improvisation, not script reading. No matter how much you plan, unexpected variables will emerge that require real-time adaptation. The action-first mindset prepares you for this reality by giving you practice at responding to circumstances as they unfold, rather than trying to predict and control every outcome in advance. One powerful technique for implementing the action-first mindset is what I call micro-commitments. Instead of making large commitments that feel overwhelming, make tiny commitments that feel manageable but still move you forward. Commit to writing one paragraph, making one phone call, sending one email, taking one class. These micro-commitments are easy to fulfill, which builds confidence and momentum. They also generate small amounts of feedback and progress, which accumulate over time into significant results. Most importantly, they break the pattern of analysis paralysis by requiring action instead of endless consideration. Another key technique is time boxing your thinking. Give yourself a specific, limited amount of time to consider a decision or plan a project. Then take action, regardless of whether you feel ready. You might spend 30 minutes researching restaurants, then pick one and make a reservation. You might spend 2 hours planning a business idea, then register a domain name and start building a website. The action-first mindset transforms failure from something to be avoided into something to be leveraged. When you act quickly and fail quickly, you learn quickly. You discover what doesn't work while you still have time and energy to try different approaches. This rapid iteration leads to faster learning and better outcomes than slow, cautious planning. Most importantly, the action-first mindset builds the kind of confidence that comes from proven capability rather than theoretical knowledge. When you've successfully navigated uncertainty, adapted to changing circumstances, and achieved results through action, you develop unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever life throws at you. This confidence is qualitatively different from the false confidence that comes from extensive planning. Planned confidence is brittle. It shatters when reality doesn't match your projections. Action-based confidence is resilient. It grows stronger when you successfully adapt to unexpected circumstances. Chapter 10. Emergency Protocols for Overthinking Attacks. Even with the best preventive strategies, you'll still experience moments when your brain spirals into overthinking mode. These are what I call overthinking attacks. Sudden episodes where your mind starts racing through endless scenarios, your stress levels spike, and you feel paralyzed by the complexity of a situation. Having emergency protocols ready for these moments can help you break the pattern quickly and regain your ability to think clearly and act decisively. The first step in any emergency protocol is recognition. You need to develop the ability to catch yourself in the middle of an overthinking attack rather than getting swept away by it. The earlier you recognize what's happening, the easier it is to interrupt the pattern and redirect your mental energy. Common signs of an overthinking attack include your heart rate increasing as you think about a situation, your mind jumping rapidly between different scenarios or outcomes, feeling overwhelmed by the number of variables to consider, having the same thoughts loop repeatedly without resolution, feeling physically tense or restless while thinking, or finding yourself researching the same topics obsessively without making progress. Once you recognize that you're in overthinking mode, the first emergency protocol is what I call the circuit breaker. Just like an electrical circuit breaker stops dangerous power surges, this technique stops dangerous thought surges before they can do damage to your decision-making capability. The circuit breaker has 3 steps: stop, breathe, and ground. First, literally say, stop, out loud or in your head. This interrupts the thought pattern and creates a moment of awareness. Second, take 5 deep breaths, focusing only on the sensation of air entering and leaving your lungs. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and reduces stress hormones. Third, ground yourself by naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This grounding technique, known as the 5-4-3-2-1 method, pulls your attention away from abstract worries and back to present moment reality. It's almost impossible to overthink about future scenarios when you're fully engaged with immediate sensory experience. The second emergency protocol is the 2-question filter. When you're overwhelmed by the complexity of a situation, ask yourself only 2 questions. What's the worst realistic outcome if I make the wrong choice? And what's the cost of not deciding at all? These questions help you gain perspective on whether your overthinking is proportionate to the actual stakes involved. Most of the time, you'll discover that the worst realistic outcome is much less catastrophic than your anxious brain is suggesting, while the cost of indecision is much higher than you've been acknowledging. This realization often provides the clarity you need to move forward with confidence. The third protocol is the constraint method. When you're paralyzed by too many options or variables, artificially constrain your choices to make the decision more manageable. If you're overthinking a career change, limit yourself to considering only 3 specific job opportunities. If you're overwhelmed by investment options, choose between only 2 or 3 specific investments. These constraints aren't permanent. You can always expand your options later if needed. But in the moment of overthinking, reducing complexity helps your brain process the decision more effectively. It's like clearing clutter from a messy room so you can actually see what you're working with. The fourth protocol is the timer technique. Set a timer for 10 minutes and allow yourself to think about the situation intensively during that time. Write down every concern, every option, every potential outcome that comes to mind. Don't try to solve anything. Just capture all the thoughts that are swirling around in your head. When the timer goes off, stop thinking and start acting. Pick the first reasonable option from your list and take one small step toward it. The purpose isn't to make the perfect choice, but to break the paralysis and generate momentum. You can always adjust course later, but you can't make progress while you're stuck in analysis mode. The fifth protocol is the outside perspective technique. When you're deep in overthinking, you lose perspective on your situation. Ask yourself, what would I tell my best friend if they came to me with this exact problem? Often, the advice you'd give to someone else is clearer and more practical than the solutions your anxious brain generates for yourself. You can also literally ask someone else for their perspective, but be specific about what kind of help you need. Don't ask for more analysis. You already have too much of that. Instead, ask for their gut reaction, their immediate impression, or what they would do in your situation. Fresh perspectives can cut through the mental fog that clouds your own judgment. The sixth protocol is the deadline declaration. When you catch yourself in an overthinking loop, publicly declare a deadline for making the decision. Tell someone else when you're going to decide, post it on social media, or write it down somewhere visible. This external commitment creates accountability that makes it harder to continue deferring the decision indefinitely. Make the deadline short enough to prevent further overthinking, but long enough to feel reasonable. For most personal decisions, 24 to 48 hours is appropriate. For smaller decisions, a few hours or even minutes might be sufficient. The seventh protocol is the energy redirect. Overthinking burns enormous amounts of mental energy without producing useful results. When you catch yourself spinning, immediately redirect that energy toward physical action. Go for a walk, do jumping jacks, clean your room, organize your desk, or engage in any activity that requires physical movement and attention. This serves multiple purposes. It interrupts the thought pattern. It burns off stress hormones through physical activity. It often provides mental clarity through the meditative aspects of repetitive tasks. And it gives you a sense of accomplishment and control that counters the helplessness of analysis paralysis. The eighth protocol is the worst-case planning. Sometimes overthinking persists because your brain is genuinely worried about potential negative outcomes. Instead of trying to suppress these worries, address them directly by creating a concrete plan for handling your worst-case scenario. Spend 15 minutes writing out exactly what you would do if your feared outcome actually occurred. How would you handle it? What resources would you use? Who would you ask for help? What would your next steps be? This planning often reveals that even worst-case scenarios are manageable, which reduces anxiety and frees you to make decisions with greater confidence. Remember, these emergency protocols are tools, not permanent solutions. The goal is to interrupt the overthinking pattern long enough to regain your equilibrium and decision-making capability. With practice, you'll get better at recognizing overthinking attacks early and deploying the appropriate protocol before the pattern becomes entrenched. The key is having these protocols ready before you need them. Write them down, practice them during calm moments, and make them as automatic as possible. When you're in the middle of an overthinking attack, you won't have the mental clarity to figure out what to do. You need to rely on prepared responses that you can execute without additional analysis. Chapter 11. Retraining your decision. Making muscles. Your decision-making ability is like a muscle that's been weakened by years of overthinking. Just as you wouldn't expect to run a marathon after months of sitting on the couch, you can't expect to make confident, quick decisions immediately after years of analysis paralysis. You need to systematically retrain your decision-making muscles through progressive exercises that build strength, speed, and confidence. The first exercise in this retraining program is what I call decision sprints. These are rapid-fire decision-making sessions where you force yourself to make multiple small decisions as quickly as possible. Set a timer for 5 minutes and make 20 decisions during that time. What to wear tomorrow, what to have for breakfast, which book to read next, what movie to watch, which route to take to work. The key is speed, not perfection. You're not trying to make optimal choices, you're trying to build the neural pathways that support quick decision-making. Each rapid decision strengthens your ability to trust your instincts and act without extensive analysis. Start with decisions that have minimal consequences. If you choose the wrong shirt or breakfast, the impact on your life is negligible. This low-stakes environment allows you to practice decision-making without the fear and anxiety that typically trigger overthinking. As you build confidence with small decisions, you can gradually apply the same speed to larger ones. The second exercise is option elimination training. Instead of trying to choose the best option from many possibilities, practice systematically eliminating options until only one remains. This approach is often easier psychologically because elimination feels less risky than selection. For example, if you're choosing a restaurant, start by eliminating cuisines you're not in the mood for, then eliminate places that are too expensive or too far away. Then eliminate places with poor reviews. Usually, this process leaves you with 1 or 2 clear choices, making the final decision much easier. This technique works because elimination uses different mental processes than selection. When you're eliminating options, you're focused on what you don't want, which is often clearer than what you do want. When you're selecting options, you're trying to predict future satisfaction, which involves much more uncertainty and analysis. The third exercise is constraint training. Deliberately impose artificial constraints on your decisions to make them easier and faster. Give yourself a budget limit, a time limit, a geographic limit, or any other boundary that reduces the number of variables you need to consider. For instance, if you're choosing a vacation destination, constrain yourself to places within a 4-hour flight, or places that cost less than a specific amount, or places you can visit during a particular season. These constraints dramatically reduce the complexity of the decision while still preserving meaningful choices. Constraints are powerful because they eliminate what researchers call choice overload. When you have too many options, your brain struggles to process them effectively and often defaults to avoiding the decision altogether. Constraints create what psychologists call satisficing, choosing the first option that meets your criteria rather than trying to find the perfect option. The fourth exercise is deadline training. Practice making decisions within artificially imposed time limits that gradually decrease over time. Start by giving yourself 1 hour to make decisions that you would normally spend days considering. Then reduce it to 30 minutes, then 15 minutes, then 5 minutes. This progressive reduction forces your brain to become more efficient at processing decision-relevant information while filtering out irrelevant details. You learn to focus on what truly matters, rather than getting lost in minor considerations that that don't significantly impact the outcome. The key is to start with a time frame that feels challenging but achievable, then gradually reduce it as your confidence grows. If you currently spend 3 days deciding whether to attend a social event, start by limiting yourself to 3 hours, then 1 hour, then 30 minutes. The fifth exercise is gut check training. Before making any decision, take a moment to notice your immediate, instinctive reaction to each option. What does your gut tell you? What feels right? What creates excitement versus anxiety? Then compare this gut reaction to your analytical assessment. Over time, you'll likely discover that your gut instincts are remarkably accurate, often more so than your analytical conclusions. This happens because your intuition processes vast amounts of information unconsciously, drawing on patterns and experiences that your conscious mind can't easily access. Start tracking the outcomes of decisions made primarily through gut instinct versus those made through extensive analysis. Most people are surprised to discover that their intuitive decisions often turn out better than their carefully analyzed ones. The sixth exercise is past decision analysis. Review major decisions you've made in the past and categorize them based on how much time you spent analyzing them before acting. Then honestly assess the outcomes. Did the decisions you spent more time analyzing turn out better than the ones you made quickly? This exercise often reveals that there's little correlation between analysis time and decision quality. In fact, many people discover that their quick decisions turned out better because they were based on clearer priorities and stronger instincts before doubt and complexity clouded their judgment. This analysis helps build confidence in your natural decision-making ability and reduces the fear that quick decisions lead to poor outcomes. It provides evidence that extensive analysis doesn't necessarily improve results and may actually make them worse. The seventh exercise is decision momentum building. Instead of treating each decision as an isolated event, practice making decisions in clusters. When you successfully make one quick decision, immediately make another one while you're still in decisive mode. This capitalizes on what psychologists call behavioral momentum, the tendency for actions to build on themselves. When you're in action mode, it's easier to continue acting. When you're in analysis mode, it's easier to continue analyzing. By clustering your decisions, you can maintain momentum and avoid falling back into overthinking patterns. The eighth exercise is confidence calibration. After making quick decisions, predict how confident you'll feel about the choice in 1 week. Then actually check back in a week and assess your actual confidence level. This helps you understand that confidence in decisions often grows over time as you see positive results or adapt to whatever outcomes occur. Most people discover that they feel more confident about their quick decisions after living with them for a while, even when the outcomes aren't perfect. This happens because taking action creates a sense of agency and control that analysis alone cannot provide. The ninth exercise is social decision-making. Practice making group decisions quickly by taking the lead in suggesting options and moving toward consensus rapidly. Instead of endlessly discussing where to go for dinner or what movie to watch, practice saying, "How about we try that new Italian place?" Or, "I vote for the action movie. Anyone strongly opposed?" This builds your confidence in making decisions that affect others and helps you develop the skill of reading group dynamics quickly rather than trying to achieve perfect consensus. Most people appreciate someone who can help move group decisions forward efficiently. The final exercise is decision documentation. Keep a simple log of the decisions you make using these techniques, noting the method used, the outcome, and how you felt about the process. This creates a record of success that you can reference when doubt creeps in. Over time, This documentation will show you that quick decisions generally lead to good outcomes, and that the anxiety you feel about rapid decision-making is disproportionate to the actual risks involved. This evidence-based confidence is much more durable than confidence based on theory or wishful thinking. Remember, retraining your decision-making muscles is a gradual process. Don't expect immediate perfection. Like physical exercise, you may feel uncomfortable or awkward at first. But consistency will build strength and fluency. The goal is progress, not perfection, and every quick decision you make strengthens your ability to make the next one even faster and with greater confidence. Chapter 12. The Art of Strategic Ignorance. In our information-saturated world, one of the most counterintuitive skills you can develop is the ability to deliberately ignore information that won't improve your decisions. This isn't about being willfully ignorant or avoiding important facts. It's about recognizing that more information often leads to worse decisions, not better ones. Strategic ignorance is the practice of consciously limiting your information intake to only what's directly relevant to the decision at hand. It's about understanding that your brain has limited processing capacity and that filling it with irrelevant information reduces your ability to focus on what actually matters. Think about how professional athletes perform under pressure. A basketball player shooting a free throw doesn't analyze the crowd noise, the opposing team's strategy, the implications of missing the shot, or the complex physics of ball trajectory. They focus on a few key elements: their stance, their grip, their target, and their rhythm. Everything else is strategically ignored. The same principle applies to decision-making. When you're choosing between job offers, you don't need to research the company's stock performance over the past decade, read every employee review on Glassdoor, or analyze the economic trends in the industry. You need to focus on salary, role responsibilities, growth opportunities, company culture, and how the position aligns with your career goals. The challenge is that your brain resists strategic ignorance because gathering information feels productive and important. Your overthinking mind convinces you that you need to know everything about a situation before making a decision. But this comprehensive approach often leads to information overload, where you become less capable of making good decisions, not more. Research in decision science consistently shows that people who have access to more information often make worse choices than those who focus on a few key factors. This happens because additional information introduces noise that obscures the signal, creates false patterns that mislead judgment, and overwhelms the brain's processing capacity. The key to strategic ignorance is learning to distinguish between information that changes your decision and information that merely satisfies your curiosity. Decision-changing information directly impacts which choice you'll make. Curiosity-satisfying information is interesting, but doesn't alter your preferred option. For example, if you're buying a car, decision-changing information includes price, reliability ratings, fuel efficiency, safety scores, and how well it meets your transportation needs. Curiosity-satisfying information might include the designer's background, the marketing campaign details, or comparison with models you're not considering. One powerful technique for implementing strategic ignorance is the three-question filter. Before researching any aspect of a decision, ask yourself, will this information change which option I choose? Do I need this information to act? Or do I just want to satisfy my curiosity? What's the minimum information I need to make a reasonable decision? If the information won't change your choice, if it's driven by curiosity rather than necessity, or if you already have sufficient information to decide, then strategically ignore it. This filter prevents you from falling down research rabbit holes that consume time without improving outcomes. Another technique is information budgeting. Just as you budget your money, budget your information consumption. Decide in advance how much time you'll spend researching a decision, what sources you'll consult, and what specific questions you need answered. When you've exhausted your information budget, stop researching and start deciding. This approach prevents the endless deferral that characterizes chronic overthinking. Your brain can't keep moving the goalposts because you've predefined what constitutes adequate research. It also forces you to prioritize the most important information rather than trying to learn everything about every aspect of the situation. Strategic ignorance also means avoiding information that increases anxiety without improving decisions. If you're flying somewhere, checking the weather forecast for your destination is useful. Researching airline safety statistics, reading about turbulence, or watching documentaries about plane crashes is not useful. It only increases anxiety without giving you any actionable information. The same principle applies to investment decisions. Understanding the fundamentals of companies you're considering investing in is important. Reading every news article about market volatility, following every expert prediction, or tracking minute-by-minute price movements is counterproductive. It creates emotional reactions that lead to poor investment decisions. Social media is a major source of decision-disrupting information. When you're trying to make a personal choice, avoid crowdsourcing opinions from your entire network. Too many perspectives create confusion rather than clarity, and social media advice is often more about the advisor's need to be helpful than about your actual situation. Strategic ignorance extends to avoiding comparisons that don't serve your decision-making. If you're happy with your salary until you learn what your colleague makes, that comparison information isn't helpful. It only creates dissatisfaction without changing the objective value of your compensation. Similarly, if you're content with your living situation until you see luxury homes on social media, that comparison information decreases your satisfaction without providing actionable insights about your housing decisions. One of the most important applications of strategic ignorance is in creative work. Writers who read extensively in their genre while working on a book often find their voice influenced by other authors. Artists who study too many techniques while creating a piece often lose their authentic style. Entrepreneurs who research every competitor exhaustively often become paralyzed by trying to differentiate from everyone else. Strategic ignorance in creative contexts means consuming less input while producing more output. It means trusting your instincts and unique perspective rather than trying to synthesize everyone else's approaches. The practice of strategic ignorance also applies to personal relationships. You don't need to know everything about your partner's past relationships, your friends' private opinions about your choices, or your family's detailed reactions to your life decisions. Too much information about others' thoughts and feelings often creates problems where none existed. In the digital age, strategic ignorance might mean unfollowing social media accounts that trigger comparison or anxiety, unsubscribing from news sources that provide information you can't act on, or turning off notifications for apps that interrupt your focus without providing value. It might also mean avoiding research about decisions that are already made. Once you've chosen a restaurant, don't read reviews that might make you second-guess your choice. Once you've booked a vacation, don't research alternative destinations that might create regret. Once you've made a purchase, don't continue shopping for better deals that might create buyer's remorse. Strategic ignorance requires developing comfort with uncertainty and incompleteness. You have to accept that you'll never have perfect information, that some questions will remain unanswered, that some aspects of every situation will remain unknown. This acceptance is liberating because it frees you from the impossible burden of trying to know everything before acting. The goal isn't to make uninformed decisions, it's to make well-informed decisions without being overwhelmed by irrelevant information. Strategic ignorance helps you focus your limited mental resources on the information that truly matters, while filtering out the noise that clouds judgment and creates paralysis. Mastering strategic ignorance transforms you from an information consumer into an information curator. You become selective about what you allow into your mind, just as you might be selective about what you allow into your home. This selectivity leads to clearer thinking, faster decisions, and better outcomes. Chapter 13. Building Unshakable Decision. Confidence. The ultimate goal of overcoming overthinking isn't just to make faster decisions, it's to make decisions with complete confidence in your ability to handle whatever outcomes arise. This kind of unshakable decision, confidence doesn't come from always being right. It comes from knowing that you can adapt, learn, and thrive, regardless of how any particular decision turns out. Most people try to build confidence by trying to guarantee positive outcomes. But this approach is fundamentally flawed because outcomes are rarely entirely within your control. Market conditions change. Other people make unexpected choices. Circumstances shift in ways you couldn't predict. If your confidence depends on controlling outcomes, it will always be fragile and temporary. True decision confidence is based on trust in your ability to respond effectively to whatever happens, not on your ability to predict what will happen. It's the difference between trying to control the weather and knowing you can handle any weather that comes your way. This confidence is built through what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief in your capability to handle challenges and achieve goals through your own actions. Self-efficacy isn't about believing you'll never face problems. It's about believing you can solve problems when they arise. The first step in building unshakable decision confidence is reframing your relationship with failure. Instead of seeing failure as evidence that you made a bad decision, start seeing it as evidence that you're willing to take risks and learn from experience. Every failure teaches you something that success cannot, and this learning makes you more capable of handling future challenges. This reframing is crucial because fear of failure is one of the primary drivers of overthinking. When you're terrified of being wrong, you'll analyze every decision to death trying to guarantee success. But when you see failure as valuable feedback rather than personal defeat, you can make decisions more quickly and confidently. Start documenting your failures and the lessons they taught you. You'll likely discover that many of your supposed failures led to unexpected opportunities, valuable learning, or important course corrections that ultimately benefited you. This documentation helps you see that failure isn't the catastrophe your anxious brain imagines it to be. The second step is developing what researchers call response flexibility, the ability to adapt your approach when circumstances change. This means having multiple strategies for achieving your goals, rather than being rigidly attached to one specific plan. For example, if you're starting a business, response flexibility means having several potential revenue streams, multiple marketing approaches, and various ways to reach your target market. If one approach doesn't work, you can quickly pivot to another without seeing it as a fundamental failure. This flexibility removes the pressure to make the perfect decision up front because you know you can adjust as you learn more. It transforms decision-making from a high-stakes, one-shot event into an iterative process of gradual improvement. The third step is building what I call outcome independence. This means deriving satisfaction and confidence from the quality of your decision-making process rather than from specific results. When you focus on making decisions based on sound principles, available information, and clear values, you can feel confident regardless of how things turn out. Outcome independence doesn't mean you don't care about results. It means you don't let results determine your self-worth or decision-making confidence. You understand that good processes lead to good outcomes over time, even if individual decisions sometimes produce disappointing results. This perspective is essential for maintaining confidence in an uncertain world. If your confidence rises and falls with every outcome, you'll be on an emotional roller coaster that makes it impossible to think clearly about future decisions. The fourth step is developing temporal perspective, the ability to see your current decision in the context of your entire life, rather than as an isolated make or break moment. Most decisions that feel enormously important in the moment have relatively little impact on your long-term well-being and success. When you're agonizing over a decision, ask yourself, will this matter in 10 years? In 5 years? Even in 1 year? Often, you'll realize that the decision isn't as consequential as your anxious brain is making it seem. This perspective reduces the pressure and allows you to decide more confidently. The fifth step is building capability confidence through skill development. The more capable you are in various areas of life, the more confident you can be in your ability to handle whatever results from your decisions. If you have strong communication skills, financial literacy, emotional intelligence, and problem-solving abilities, you can face uncertain situations with greater confidence. This doesn't mean you need to become an expert in everything, but having a broad base of practical skills gives you confidence that you can learn, adapt, and overcome challenges as they arise. Each new skill you develop increases your overall resilience and decision-making confidence. The sixth step is practicing decisive communication, the ability to express your decisions clearly and confidently to others. When you communicate decisions with certainty and conviction, you reinforce your own confidence while also gaining respect from others. This doesn't mean being rigid or closed to feedback, but it does mean avoiding the wishy-washy language that undermines confidence. Instead of saying, "I think maybe I might try this approach," say, "I've decided to pursue this strategy." Instead of, "I'm not sure, but I guess we could," say, "Let's go with this option." The language you use to communicate decisions shapes how you think about them and how others respond to them. Confident communication creates a feedback loop that strengthens your belief in your own judgment. The seventh step is developing regret immunity, the ability to make peace with decisions that don't turn out as hoped without second-guessing your judgment or decision-making process. Regret is often more about wishing you had perfect information than about actually making poor decisions with the information you had. When you feel regret about a decision, ask yourself, given what I knew at the time and the values I held, was this a reasonable choice? Usually, the answer is yes. You can't judge past decisions based on information you didn't have when you made them. Regret immunity also involves accepting that every choice involves trade-offs. When you choose one option, you give up the potential benefits of other options. This is inevitable, not a sign of poor decision-making. The goal isn't to eliminate all trade-offs, but to make trade-offs consciously and in alignment with your priorities. The eighth step is building decision momentum by celebrating the act of deciding itself, regardless of outcomes. Every time you make a decision quickly and move forward, acknowledge that accomplishment. You're building the mental muscle that allows you to navigate life efficiently and effectively. This celebration shouldn't wait for positive outcomes. It should happen immediately after making the decision. You're reinforcing the behavior of decisive action, which is valuable independent of any particular result. The final step is developing trust in the process. Confidence that good decision-making habits lead to good outcomes over time, even when individual decisions sometimes disappoint. This long-term perspective allows you to maintain confidence even during temporary setbacks. Building unshakable decision confidence is a gradual process that requires consistent practice and a willingness to challenge your perfectionist tendencies. But as this confidence grows, you'll find that decision-making becomes not just faster and easier, but actually enjoyable. You'll start to see decisions as opportunities for growth and learning, rather than threats to be avoided. Chapter 14. Advanced Techniques for Complex Decisions. Not all decisions can be resolved with the 2-minute rule or simple elimination techniques. Some situations genuinely require more sophisticated approaches because they involve multiple stakeholders, significant long-term consequences, or complex trade-offs between competing values. However, even these complex decisions don't require endless analysis. They require structured approaches that prevent overthinking while ensuring thorough consideration. The first advanced technique is values-based decision architecture. This approach starts by clarifying your core values and using them as the primary filter for evaluating options. Instead of trying to optimize for every possible variable, you focus on which choice best aligns with what matters most to you fundamentally. Begin by identifying your top 5 values in the relevant life area. For career decisions, these might include autonomy, financial security, creativity, impact, and work-life balance. For relationship decisions, they might include honesty, growth, compatibility, shared goals, and emotional support. For major purchases, they might include quality, sustainability, practicality, aesthetics, and cost-effectiveness. Once you've clarified your values, score each option on how well it satisfies each value on a scale of 1 to 10. The option with the highest total score becomes your choice, but more importantly, the process forces you to think consciously about what matters most to you rather than getting lost in surface-level details. This technique is particularly powerful because it prevents you from being swayed by factors that aren't actually important to you. You might discover that you've been agonizing over variables that don't align with your true priorities, while overlooking aspects that are crucial to your satisfaction. The second technique is scenario planning with probability weighting. This approach acknowledges that some decisions do require thinking through potential future outcomes, but it does so in a structured way that prevents endless speculation. Identify 3 scenarios for each major option: best case, worst case, and most likely case. For each scenario, estimate both the probability of it occurring and how well you could handle it if it did occur. This creates a matrix that helps you choose based on both likelihood and your capability to manage different outcomes. The key insight is that you don't need to prepare for every possible scenario. You need to prepare for scenarios that are either highly likely or would be particularly challenging to handle. This focused approach prevents the analysis paralysis that comes from trying to consider every possible future. The third technique is the consultant method. Imagine you're a highly paid consultant who has been hired to make this decision for someone else. What would you recommend based on the available information? This mental shift often provides clarity because it removes the emotional attachment and perfectionism that cloud your judgment about your own decisions. Consultants are expected to make recommendations based on incomplete information within tight timeframes. They focus on the most important factors, make reasonable assumptions about unknown variables, and provide clear direction rather than endless analysis. Adopting this mindset helps you approach your own complex decisions with similar efficiency and objectivity. The fourth technique is progressive commitment. Instead of trying to make one final, irreversible decision, structure your choice as a series of smaller commitments that allow you to gather information and adjust course as you go. For example, if you're considering a major career change, you might start by taking a course in the new field, then volunteering or freelancing in that area, then perhaps taking a part-time position. before fully committing to the transition. Each step provides new information that informs the next decision. This approach reduces the pressure of making perfect decisions up front because you're not committing to an unchangeable path. You're creating a series of decision points that allow you to adapt based on experience rather than speculation. The fifth technique is the advisory board approach. For truly significant decisions, create a small group of trusted advisors who can provide different perspectives and expertise. This isn't about crowdsourcing the decision to everyone you know. It's about strategically seeking input from people whose judgment you respect and whose expertise is relevant. Choose advisors who represent different viewpoints and areas of knowledge. For a business decision, you might consult someone with industry experience, someone with financial expertise, and someone who knows you well personally. Give them specific information about your situation and ask for their recommendation, not just their analysis. Set a specific timeline for gathering this input, perhaps 1 week, and then make your decision based on the advice you've received. This prevents the endless consultation that can turn advisory input into another form of analysis paralysis. The sixth technique is asymmetric risk analysis. This approach focuses specifically on decisions where the potential upside and downside are significantly different. Some choices offer limited upside, but catastrophic downside risk, while others offer enormous upside with manageable downside. For each option, ask yourself, what's the worst realistic outcome and how would I recover from it? And what's the best realistic outcome and how likely is it? Choices with manageable downside and significant upside become obvious priorities, while choices with catastrophic risk require much more careful consideration. This analysis often reveals that your anxiety about a decision is disproportionate to the actual risks involved. Many opportunities that feel scary actually have limited downside with substantial upside potential. The seventh technique is the regret minimization framework, popularized by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Project yourself forward to age 80 and imagine looking back at this decision. Which choice would you be most likely to regret not trying? This long-term perspective often clarifies decisions because it shifts focus from short-term comfort to long-term fulfillment. Many people regret chances they didn't take more than they regret chances that didn't work out as hoped. The eighth technique is cost of delay analysis. For decisions you've been postponing, calculate what continued indecision is actually costing you. This includes opportunity costs, ongoing stress, relationship impacts, and the compounding effects of not moving forward. Often, the cost of delaying a decision exceeds the cost of making an imperfect decision and adjusting course later. This analysis can provide the motivation needed to choose action over analysis. The ninth technique is the premortem process. Before finalizing a complex decision, imagine that you've implemented your choice and it has failed completely. What are the most likely reasons it failed? What warning signs would you have ignored? What could you have done differently? This exercise helps you identify potential problems while you still have time to address them or choose a different path. It's more productive than endless worry because it focuses on specific, actionable insights rather than general anxiety. The final technique is decision, documentation, and review. For your most important decisions, write down your reasoning, the factors you considered, the alternatives you rejected, and your expected outcomes. Review these documents periodically to learn from your decision-making patterns. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It prevents you from second-guessing decisions based on information you didn't have at the time. It helps you identify which factors are most predictive of good outcomes. And it builds confidence in your decision-making ability by showing you that your reasoning was sound even when outcomes weren't perfect. Remember, these advanced techniques are tools, not requirements. The goal is still to make good decisions efficiently, not to make perfect decisions eventually. Even complex decisions benefit from clear deadlines, decisive action, and the willingness to adapt based on new information, rather than trying to predict every possible outcome in advance. Chapter 15. Living the Decisive Life. The transformation from chronic overthinker to decisive action taker isn't just about changing how you make individual choices. It's about fundamentally restructuring how you move through the world. When you truly master decisive living, every aspect of your life improves. Your relationships become more authentic, your career progresses faster, your health improves, and your overall satisfaction increases dramatically. Living decisively means operating from a default of action rather than analysis. Instead of asking, "Should I do this?" you ask, "Why wouldn't I do this?" Instead of looking for reasons to hesitate, you look for reasons to move forward. This shift in default thinking accelerates every area of your life because you spend more time implementing and less time deliberating. This doesn't mean becoming reckless or impulsive. Decisive living is about making thoughtful choices quickly and then committing fully to those choices. It's about trusting your judgment, embracing uncertainty, and having confidence in your ability to handle whatever outcomes arise from your decisions. One of the most profound changes you'll experience is in your relationships. When you stop overthinking every interaction, you become more authentic and present with others. You say what you mean what you say, and you don't spend hours afterward analyzing every word choice or facial expression. This authenticity is magnetic. People are drawn to individuals who are comfortable with themselves and confident in their communication. Your relationships deepen because you're able to be vulnerable and honest without constantly second-guessing yourself or managing impressions. Decisive living also transforms your approach to opportunities. While others are analyzing and researching, you're taking action and learning from experience. This gives you enormous advantages in every competitive situation, from job markets to business opportunities to personal relationships. You become known as someone who gets things done, who can be counted on to move projects forward, who doesn't get stuck in planning phases that never lead to execution. This reputation opens doors and creates opportunities that simply aren't available to chronic overthinkers. Your career accelerates because you're willing to take calculated risks that others avoid. You apply for stretch positions, propose innovative projects, and volunteer for challenging assignments. While your colleagues are determining whether they're ready for these opportunities, you're gaining experience that makes you even more qualified for the next level. The compound effect of decisive action is extraordinary. Each quick decision leads to faster learning, which leads to better judgment, which leads to more confidence, which leads to even quicker decisions. This positive feedback loop accelerates your personal and professional growth in ways that careful planning simply cannot match. Your stress levels decrease dramatically when you stop carrying the mental burden of unmade decisions. The anxiety that comes from perpetual indecision evaporates when you develop the habit of choosing quickly and moving forward. You sleep better, think more clearly, and have more energy for the things that actually matter. Decisive living also improves your physical health. The chronic stress of overthinking elevates cortisol levels, suppresses immune function, and creates the kind of mental fatigue that makes healthy choices feel overwhelming. When you eliminate analysis paralysis, you free up mental and emotional resources for self-care. You'll find it easier to maintain exercise routines because you don't spend mental energy debating whether to work out each day. You just do it. You'll make better food choices because you don't exhaust your willpower on trivial decisions, leaving you with mental energy for important health decisions. The creative benefits of decisive living are particularly powerful. When you stop overthinking, you tap into the flow state that produces your best work. You trust your instincts, follow your inspiration, and create from a place of authenticity rather than trying to analyze your way to creativity. Artists, writers, musicians, and entrepreneurs who embrace decisive living consistently produce more work of higher quality than their overthinking counterparts. They understand that creating mediocre work regularly leads to eventual excellence, while trying to create perfect work occasionally leads to creating nothing at all. Your financial situation improves when you become decisive about money. You stop researching investments endlessly and start building wealth through consistent action. You negotiate more effectively because you're comfortable with uncertainty and quick to recognize valuable opportunities. You also waste less money on purchases you overthought but didn't really want, or on opportunities you missed while deliberating. Decisive people often achieve better financial outcomes, not because they make perfect financial decisions, but because they make good decisions quickly and adjust course as needed. The parenting benefits of decisive living are profound if you have children. Kids thrive with parents who are confident decision makers because it creates a sense of security and stability. Children learn decision-making skills through modeling, and parents who are comfortable with uncertainty teach resilience better than parents who try to control every outcome. Decisive parents also enjoy parenting more because they spend less time agonizing over every choice and more time being present with their children. They trust their instincts, make reasonable decisions about rules and consequences, and don't second-guess themselves constantly. Perhaps most importantly, living decisively allows you to be fully present in your own life. When you're not constantly analyzing past decisions or worrying about future choices, you can actually experience the moments that make up your days. You notice sunsets, enjoy conversations, savor meals, and appreciate experiences, instead of being lost in mental commentary about everything that's happening. This presence is where real happiness and fulfillment are found. The ripple effects of decisive living extend to everyone around you. Your confidence and clarity give others permission to be more decisive themselves. You become a catalyst for action in your family, your workplace, and your community. People start coming to you for advice, not because you have all the answers, but because you have the courage to act despite uncertainty. Your example shows others that it's possible to navigate life's complexity without getting paralyzed by it. Living decisively also means accepting that some of your decisions will turn out poorly, and that's perfectly okay. You understand that the cost of occasional mistakes is far outweighed by the benefits of consistent action. You've learned to see failures as feedback rather than verdicts on your worth or capability. This acceptance creates a kind of freedom that's unavailable to perfectionists and overthinkers. You can take risks, try new things, and explore possibilities without the crushing fear of being wrong. This freedom is the foundation of a life well lived. The ultimate goal isn't to become someone who never thinks before acting. It's to become someone who thinks clearly, decides quickly, and acts confidently. It's to develop such trust in your ability to handle uncertainty that you can move through life with grace, purpose, and joy. This is the decisive life, one where you spend more time living and less time analyzing, more time creating and less time planning, more time connecting and less time worrying. It's a life where you become the author of your own story rather than a confused critic trying to perfect a script that's already being performed. The transformation from overthinker to decisive action taker is one of the most liberating changes you can make. It frees you from the prison of analysis paralysis and gives you the key to a life of momentum, growth, and authentic fulfillment. The only question left is, what are you going to do first?